I remember one day, my mom was like, I think Katy Perry just retweeted your video on Twitter. I was like, no, that can't be real. When we woke up and we saw that, we're like, okay, something is different here and something's about to change.
You were on Dance Moms?
What's funny that not a lot of people know is that
What? Oh no. I don't know if that's gonna make the final cut.
you can brush it off for so long, but at a certain point, it will start to get into your head. It just hits you in the face. You're like, wait, hang on, I actually have to take a second and like take care of me first. It was a bowl of oatmeal and I just like freaked out. And that was like the moment where I was like, why am I afraid of food? No one knew what I was going through at the time. I felt like I was alone. And it was because I didn't ever really open up to people about anything that I was going through. And I kind of shielded myself away.
What were the steps you took to getting on a path to recovery?
Something so important to know is that
I want to go kind of back to the beginning. What was the start for you? When did you start dancing? How did you start dancing? Take me back.
I started dancing when I was around 5 years old. Before that, I actually did Taekwondo. And my whole family did it. I just personally wasn't a big fan of it. I just remember going out for competitions for Taekwondo and I just didn't want to fight anybody. And so I would just like stand there and let people like kick me.
Not a great strategy. I'm no martial artist, but
I was really good at the forms part of it. Because I was so young, my mom wanted to keep me busy in something. So just as a fluke, no one in my family was really a dancer at all. She put me in a dance class. Super shy kid, didn't know how it was gonna be. And I just like fell in love with it. I just lit up. And that first year, I just remember like being on the competition team and they like called me their secret weapon. The first time I ever performed on stage and I got off, I was crying. And my mom is like, oh no, I scarred her for life, that's it. And I come up to her and I go, I wanna go back out there. And so it's crazy to say like at 5 years old that I already found what I wanted to do and what I love to do, but something just clicked and it was kind of this other way for me to be able to express myself because I was so shy and so introverted.
it's really interesting you say that at 5 you felt like you found your passion, because I think a lot of people would assume that at 5 years old, you're just kind of doing what your parents are putting you in and you're not really at the stage yet where you're able to make your own decisions.
Yeah.
So having the awareness to be like, this is something I love and that I want to put a lot of time and energy into at 5. I couldn't tie my shoes at 5. I don't think I could do anything. You're already on stage, like probably winning competitions.
It is quite crazy, like especially when you go back and watch old videos on the DVDs and stuff. It's like, man, I was only 5 doing that, but it got me to where I am today and out of a fluke thing. Like I could have still been in Taekwondo.
You
or
could
just
still
like,
be getting kicked.
Yeah, but everything happens for a reason and I'm so grateful that it did.
Speaking of old videos, I remember the work video. Was that like the first moment? You were what, like 10 or something
Yeah.
when that happened?
Yeah.
And that video got over like 20 million views, which at the time back then was insane. That's like
Yeah.
equal to like 1 billion views now.
Yeah.
Was that the first time when you experienced some level of stardom or like just crazy viral sensation type of thing?
For sure. I remember being 10 years old. It was my first ever hip hop solo. Like I was super technical at the time. So doing hip hop at a competition was unheard of. It never won, it never did good. I performed it. It was the first time like a hip hop solo ever really won first overall too. So we're like, wait, this is crazy. I remember at the time, like my dad had shared it on YouTube. Another YouTube channel had picked it up as well and it was Dancing with YouTube. And I remember one day, my mom was like, I think like Katy Perry just retweeted your video on Twitter. And I was like, no, that can't be real. It's probably some fan page, like whatever. And we checked and it was actually her. It was also one of the very first overnight sensations for a dance video, and getting 1 million views overnight was unheard of. And so when we woke up and we saw that, we're like, okay, something is different here and something's
So
about to
here's
change.
how Casey Rice just became a full-fledged internet sensation. Pop princess Katy Perry tweeted them out to her 38 million followers. And that's when little Casey totally blew up.
It's hard to remember almost how things were back then.
Yeah.
Because now every artist has their social media team. They repost 1 million videos a day. It's usually not even them. Back then, getting a celebrity to retweet your video from their account, that was insane.
Yeah.
Like it didn't happen. It wasn't like
still-
artists were doing that.
It still
you know?
doesn't even feel real that it happened like that.
So that's 10.
Yeah.
By 10, you've already won competitions. Hip hop solo went viral. Katy Perry's your biggest fan. Tough to keep going up from here. You set the bar high.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that you started to get into the industry from there.
Yeah.
I remember the first time that you ever came into my class,
Yeah.
and I was like, who is this girl? I can't even explain the like shock that was going through my head throughout the class when I was watching the adult dancers like struggle to pick it up. You didn't make a mistake for like an hour and a half, like not even learning it. And I think my jaw, like I was like, all right, yeah, good job, kid. But in my head, I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Who is this kid?
I remember like taking your class for the first time because it was like right after I finished my school. Like my mom drove me to your class, and it was one of my favorite like experiences, like the first time walking into your class. I mean, that video too, it was such a moment in time, and like I'll just vividly remember that day.
How did it evolve from there? Because I remember talking to your mom. Like, I don't know what's going on with your kid. Like, I don't know what she's like eating or something, or she's just like built different. But like, you need to have her in class more. Like, I want to see her dancing more.
Yeah.
And you started to come out to LA a lot. You started to kind of mix in with the other crowd of that whole group of you kids that was just like from another planet started coming together.
Yeah.
What was that like for you going from competition world to now LA? Every class video that me and the teachers back then were posting, it was like 20 million, 30 million, 50 million views. Things just started to get crazy quickly. I know for me being an adult, it was insane. So I can't even imagine as like a 12-year-old kid, you're starting to get recognized in class. Like what's going on?
Because I started so young, like for me, it's always just been normal. Like it never felt like, oh, I'm famous, I'm more known. Like it never felt like that. I think when I finally started to mold into that crowd of the up and comer kids and everything, it was a cool thing for me because I was homeschooled at the time. The only friends that I had were from dance, from my studio. So it was like, oh, I have another crowd of friends. And because we were all growing up in the same time, we could relate on the experiences that we were going through on social media. When I started to get from 12, 13, 14 years old, that's when social media just became more prominent in my life, where like I actually used it. And that's when I started seeing comments of the comparison between me and my friends of like, oh, this person should have been in front, or they messed up, or their face looks weird, all that. You know, you can brush it off for so long, but at a certain point, it will start to get into your head, even if you don't want it to. Had to kind of quickly learn to grasp onto and say, hey, this is what it is. These are just random people behind the screens. And I think it just pushed me further into wanting to prove to myself that I can keep growing and evolving.
I think the way that you talk about handling the negative comments so that it doesn't affect you, is especially that young, is really amazing. Were there any comments that really got to you, or things that kept coming up that were really difficult for you to handle?
When I got a little bit older, you're going through so much, like as a person, when people are also attacking you and like pointing out specific things that you're insecure about, then you start to believe them. But a lot of it was like, she shouldn't be in the front, or like her friends are better, blah, blah, blah. But what people don't realize is like the teacher doesn't choose who goes like front center. We just do it because we're taking class. So like it was like just a lot of pressure, because I felt like if I messed up, or if I did something wrong, or if somebody thought somebody else did better than me, like I felt that pressure to always feel like I had to be perfect, or I had to be on top of my game. And it wasn't even just for videos, it was also in class, like feeling that pressure of like, oh, are people watching me? I was there just like everyone else. So I'm there to learn. I'm gonna mess up, I'm gonna fall, I'm gonna do all this stuff. But I think in the back of my head, I was like, oh, I have to actually really be on it. Being in the public eye and being on social media, you feel like you have to be doing something and proving yourself to somebody every single day. As that takes over, the things that you actually go through in daily life take a back seat. And so when you're faced up with everything and it just hits you in the face, you're like, wait, hang on, I actually have to take a second and like take care of me first.
So in preparing for this video, I learned something new about Casey Rice. You were on Dance Moms?
I was for 2 weeks, but I was on the Candy Apples team.
Ooh.
So going into it, didn't really know what to expect, because it's reality TV, so you don't really know what's real, what's not real, all that type of stuff. It was an interesting experience, to say the least. On set, there was just something that I was like, I don't know how I'm feeling right now. So like the first week, we just had like the normal group dance, you know, competed against the Abby Lee team. And then the second week, what's funny that not a lot of people know is that they had me do a solo, and Trisha had like choreographed it. I was like on FaceTime in the hotel room. I'm figuring it out in like one day. And we go to compete, and they do like the top 10 and I don't place.
What?
I don't even place.
You didn't make the top 10?
No.
The same girl who got shouted out by Katy Perry a year earlier, 50 million views on your video.
Like, I don't know what was going on behind the scenes or anything, but honestly, me and my mom like literally just saw each other and we just were like, what is going on?
Wow. That's that candy apple curse.
The candy apple curse, I guess. A fun fact is like those 2 weeks happened, and then as I was leaving for that job, I booked Super Bowl. So Super Bowl happened 2 weeks after that.
Missy Elliott?
Missy Elliott.
Oh, so good.
And Katy Perry, funny enough.
Wow. Did she remember your video?
She did.
Really?
Yeah, so like my mom had printed out like her tweet and she signed it, and like we took a photo together, and it was really sweet, and I think that was like such a full circle moment for me to like be able to meet her and say thank you. But it's just crazy and wild to me that those two things were like right after each other in the same year. Later on, when the show actually aired, they never aired my solo.
They didn't even put it in the show.
They didn't put it in the show. Like, we filmed everything of like me learning it, you know, because obviously I learned it off of a phone, and we were like, yes, this is so great, all this stuff. But they didn't they didn't air it. So there's just like a really grainy video of someone in the audience who filmed it.
That's why I wasn't sure if you were on
Yeah.
Dance Moms. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
It's so funny when people are like, oh my God, you were on Dance Moms? I'm like, well, yes and no. I was barely shown.
It's just like your head hovering over someone's
Yeah,
shoulder.
you'll
and
just
like,
see a glimpse of like my high bun, you know, all of that.
welcome to reality television. So at this time, you're talking about like your teenage years. I knew all of you guys individually. I didn't get too much into like who's best friends with who and the
Yeah.
cliques. I just wanted to be removed from it. I'm like, I love all you guys. Get along, be friends, train hard, we're good. But I really didn't see the whole you and Sean teaming up thing coming. How did that end up happening? Because there were so many dancers that you were close with, that you danced amazing with. Where did that come from? What happened?
So we had known each other ever since like competition days. Crazy to say. So I remember one year he had asked me to do this video with him. And at the time, I, again, was super shy, and I was like, oh yeah, sure, like, okay. I did that video with him. That was just kind of like the first time we ever like danced together. It was cool because at the time there weren't a lot of dancers who also did like a fusion style or contemporary style or had that extra element of storytelling that we have today. I, at the time, was known for being such a full out like hip hop dancer. Like that's how people knew me, even though I had this technical training behind me. From there, that's when we did World of Dance, and we were able just to kind of like create these incredible pieces that now people still to this day come up to me and say how it inspired them to start dancing or made them feel something that they never felt before, or like couldn't get the words out. And I think that's just like the magic that dance has, is like it brings people together from all parts of the world.
It was a really crazy time for me because I'd watched all of you guys from the time you were 10 or 12. I've watched you guys grow up. This was like the first time that I remember being like, wow, it's no longer teacher-student. You guys are creating something that is unique and powerful, and it's your own. And I was watching it as an audience member and being inspired by it. And I remember that was like one of the flips to where I was like, damn, they're grown. Like, this is crazy, you know?
Yeah.
Now you're really your own person and your own artist. And it was a really amazing time to watch you.
I could kind of feel that switch in myself as well, so it's interesting that like you're able to see that. I think during that time, I was slowly starting to find my own voice. Like I was still like, you know, in my little shield of life, but I slowly started to kind of like transform, not only as a dancer, but who I was too. And so I think like that was just kind of like an open gate to me finding who I was outside of just being a dancer.
So going from World of Dance, social media blowing up, videos blowing up, everything blowing up, you talked about some of the imposter syndrome feelings, or just also mentally things got a little bit more challenging once you hit that peak. What were those next couple years like, and what were some of the challenges that you were going through in your own head?
World of Dance was 2018. And then as 2019 came around, I like finally made New Year's resolutions. One of the most prominent ones was just like, you know, I just want to like be healthy. I was already a healthy kid. I was just like, you know, I just want to like take it a little bit more seriously and just cuz. As like months went on, I started not really having a lot of like free time to do anything else. And it ended up taking over my life in the worst way that it could have. On the outside, it seemed like I was doing so many great things. I was working all this stuff. On the inside, I was losing control. And so for me, the one thing that I felt like I could control was that health aspect, that food aspect. And as I was working, ended up developing an eating disorder that I didn't even know was happening at the time. And for me, I was just like, oh no, I feel great. Like I'm doing great. Like everyone's coming up to me, complimenting me, all this stuff. Within a span of 2 weeks, there's videos that you can see side by side, and I just look like a ghost in the second one. Again, at the time, I didn't realize it until like a couple months later, because when you're in that situation, you don't actually see it until you're out of it. Then I started getting comments of, she okay? What's going on? People kept reaching out to my mom, being like, hey, what's going on? Like, is Casey okay? It got really bad to a point where they were like, no, we have to do something about this. But I was in the public eye, I was taking classes every day. So like, for me, I was like, that's not a priority. It was to a point where I wouldn't have been able to keep dancing. I wouldn't have been able to do the things that I was doing because I was so frail that my body just wouldn't handle it. I remember having bruises all over my body, everything. I remember one class, before I went, my mom was like, can you just like eat a little something before you go to class? Like try and get me to eat. And I was just like, no, it's fine, I'll like eat when I get home. And she's like, no, like you're not going unless you eat something. And it was a bowl of oatmeal, and I just like freaked out. And then that was like the moment where I was like, why am I afraid of food? Like, where was that switch? From that point on, it was such a long road for me to get back because, again, I was still so active. No one knew what I was going through at the time. I didn't share anything about it. I didn't tell very many of my friends. Maybe like 3 people outside of my family knew. And so for me, it was just this mental battle of like, I knew I had to get better and I knew I had to gain my weight back, but it was that fear of like, what are people gonna say? And doing it in the public eye isn't the greatest thing to do. That's kind of when my mental health took a turn. By the end of the year, my mental health was still bad, but I was starting to be healthy again. And so I like felt good. And then 2020 hit. For me, I'll just never forget the week that COVID hit because I was still trying to recover and I ended up breaking my ankle the week before we went into lockdown. Now I actually have to face everything. And I couldn't dance, I couldn't do anything. It was like focusing on getting better. Everything just hit and I was at the lowest point. For me, it wasn't about, oh, I wanted to look a certain way or, oh, I didn't think I was healthy or anything like that. It was just like, I put my mind to it and then it just got out of hand. And it was something that rooted from other experiences in my life, whether it was losing friendships or not having people around in my circle, feeling alone. And that was the biggest thing is I felt like I was alone. And it was because I didn't ever really open up to people about anything that I was going through. And I kind of shielded myself away.
Thank you for sharing it. I knew you at that time and I had no idea that you were going through any of it. And I think it's so important and so amazing that you're willing to talk about it and you have the courage to talk about it because everyone from the outside would have never thought that Casey, she's famous and she has all this going for her and dance and friends and whatever, would be experiencing something like that. But the truth is that we all go through things. Just because you have success or money or social media platform or whatever doesn't mean that you don't have really tough things that you're going through. And I think that you opening up about it is gonna help a lot of people. And I've been watching you from afar, like start to post more about it and be more vocal about the things you went through. And I think that as much as you've done as a dancer, you voicing what you went through and how you're working through it and being open is gonna do just as much for people as your talent as a dancer has done. And it takes a lot of courage to do it. So I really am grateful that you're talking about it because so many people need to hear it. For someone out there that maybe is going through something like that, whether it's an eating disorder or anything that they're struggling with, what was the thing for you? You mentioned that one time where you didn't want to eat the oatmeal and it was like, you were like, something's wrong here. But once you realize that something is not right and you want to make it better, what were the steps you took to actually getting on a path to recovery?
Something so important to know is that recovery isn't linear for anybody. I think it was baby steps, introducing things again that like I didn't have. It takes time. Like it wasn't just like a switch and I was like, okay, like I'm just gonna like fix it now. Even though I was eating more too, I still was losing a lot because of the amount of activity that I was doing.
Because you're still dancing.
Because I'm still
full-time,
dancing, everything.
like-
So although like I was refueling myself, it wasn't enough for me to be able to be healthy again because I was still burning it all off.
At what point are you like, I want to make this public, I want to tell my story to help other people? How did that switch happen, and what gave you the courage to do that?
It was so important for me to be able to share something like that, to create this little community, like this safe space for people to relate and to talk about it. And it's okay to talk about it. I think it's great to talk about it. When it comes to social media and it comes to like body dysmorphia or eating disorders or mental health or anything like that, I'm very grateful for how much more open people are about it.
I feel what you're saying a lot about how even a few years ago it was so much harder to talk about these things, insecurities, struggles of any kind. I remember going through a really tough time at the beginning of COVID too, and kind of questioning my entire career. And I woke up and I just didn't even want to dance, didn't want to think about dance. I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone about that. I definitely felt like I couldn't put that online. For me, it wasn't until recently I made a video on the channel a month or two ago, basically being like, guys, like some days I wake up and I don't want to do it. And I don't like making 10-second videos every day, and I don't dance in my bedroom, and like maybe I'm burnt out, I don't know, but I'm gonna explore it and I'm gonna be honest. And I think it was a lot of people before me, like you, talking openly about things that also gave me the courage to do something like that, which I would have never done on my channel a few years ago. So sometimes you might not even realize that you say something and someone else acts on it, and it causes this whole spider web of people being more open and taking some of that weight off their shoulders and feeling like they're not alone.
That honestly means the world to me, because it is a scary thing when you go through moments of, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. You feel like you have to because it's the only thing that people know you for. But a lot of people follow you because they love who you are. And so I think when I realized that, it just gave me that courage to be able to share more things outside of just dance. And honestly, it makes me the most happy. And I think that's why at this point in my life, I feel a little bit more peaceful and not so chaotic. I do have moments of chaos, but like I can really just sit with all of that and just be thankful for it.
I did want to ask you about Weirdo, because that's been a big thing for you. You had clothing, it was sort of like a lifestyle and a mantra in a sense, and it kind of comes from almost being a little bit outcast, the word. Why the word, and what did that mean to you?
What it meant was we embrace individuality, realness, diversity, and originality. And it was just kind of this like phrase and reclaiming a negative word, a negative connotation word, as something positive. I created that with my mom, and it connected with so many people, and I remember getting so many messages of how it inspired them, and I think that just like, it meant the most to me, because just something of me just being myself, so many people resonated with that.
I love the way you said it's almost like reclaiming a word that has negative connotation and turning it into something positive. I think that so many people get labeled things like a weirdo, and those are often the people that are the most brilliant, the most creative, have the most to offer. But if you don't understand, or you don't have people around you to help you utilize that talent and not get down on yourself when those words are thrown around at you, sometimes those qualities don't really get to shine. Doing what you did and making it something that's positive, and hopefully allowing people to see like, oh, that quality in me that often gets labeled weirdo or I get bullied for is actually potentially my superpower. I'm really grateful that you came today and that we got to have this talk. Like, I knew we were gonna obviously dive into some different things, and I'm familiar with your story, but your ability to put it into words and to be open about it, and both the positives and the negatives, and not judge it, or not just for what it is, just speaking through it, and your perspective on things is so insanely mature. I know that on the inside there's still struggles and stuff, but just know that from the outside, the people that have known you for a long time all share the same sentiment, that if you never did anything again, if you never danced again, you wanted to do whatever, you want to go crochet sweaters for the rest of your life, like we will still be so proud and supportive of you. And I hope that you don't feel that pressure at all, because you deserve to be in a place where you're doing it just purely out of love. I couldn't be more proud of the person that you're becoming, and grateful that we're still friends, and maybe, you know, once in a while we still get in the studio and dance a little bit, you know, but you're one of the people from that time when I was starting my career and I had nothing and I was just getting started out, and you were 12, but like you were there, and that familiarity and seeing your mom and you, and it meant so much to me. So still having you in my life so many years later means a lot.
I'm so grateful for you as well. And, you know, even being here 10, 11 years later, like, I'm so thankful that you still view me as me and have never lost that. And I'm grateful that we still can come back like nothing has passed, like at all. Like, it feels like no time has passed, even though it's probably been like years since we've actually been able to like sit down and talk. But seriously, like, you are so incredible, and I'm so very grateful for you and everything that we've been able to do together and create together. And although it was 10 years ago for us, it could still be their first time watching a video and being drawn to it for a specific reason. And I think like what you were able to create growing up too has helped a lot of people as well. So I'm thankful that I got to be a little part of that.
You were more than a little part of it. You were a lot of part of it.
Just a part of it.
Wow, what a ride. It's only beginning. I can't wait to see what you do from here, and no matter what, I'll be cheering you on.
Thank you. One at a time. Make sure to subscribe.
Subscribe some.
Subscribe some on the TubeView, and below comments.
Occasions notifs on.
Occasions notice on. Just give me my money.
Oh no.